Hi, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and welcome to This is Manitoba, a podcast where we lean into local issues together and we explore a story from a number of different vantage points that affect you, a story that affects you here in the province where we all live. Today, how did Canada Post strikes affect Manitobans? That's a question we're going to try to dig into today on the podcast on This is Manitoba. So you're going to hear from two different postal workers. They have worked for years here in Manitoba, delivering your mail. And we will hear from you about getting the mail and what the service means to you today. So as you are well aware, this is a moment in Canada Post history that is going to be critical when you look at the losses that the corporation has suffered. Also, when you compare numbers from 2018 to 2025, how viable is Canada Post as a service? What do you need from Canada Post? All things we're going to explore today. So Manitobans who use the postal service to start with are facing down what could be a second strike in just a 6-month period. CBC Manitoba's Chloe Friesen asked you what a possible strike would mean to you.
Hello, Violet.
Hi.
Hi. So you would like to see Canada Post stay around?
I definitely would, because I write a lot of letters and I also mail a lot of cards, and probably monthly and sometimes weekly. And I just think that cards and letters are so much more personal than getting texts or emails. I really do.
Our next caller is Mark, and Mark is a small business owner. Mark, what's your perspective on this?
Hi there. Yeah, I'm a small business owner, and yes, we do need Canada Post. For one, they keep the rates low, as I talk to a lot of the different carrier companies. So we do need them to provide that service and keeping the rates low. If they're gone, then it just becomes a free-for-all and companies get to charge whatever they want. So that is a good thing. We do need the 7-day parcel delivery business. The Monday to Friday just doesn't work. And another thing is again, I get to talk to a lot of these courier companies, and a lot of people think because, Canada Post is for the government, they are not the highest paid out there. There are certainly companies out there who make a lot more than them. And as of the top 4 or 5 companies, they are the lowest paid. So they just want to get in par with what everybody else makes. And they also want a piece of that pie in that delivery business. And to become that, you need to deliver 7 days a week.
Right. And Mark, you're a small business owner. Before I let you go, I want to ask about the impact of the strike in November and December. Like you sound like you're in favor of some of the negotiating points that Canada Post workers are putting forward. But how did the strike impact you?
Heavily. The uncertainty is what kills businesses, right? So we need certainty in this market. And I think why there is so much uncertainty is because it's like Professor Lee is saying, it's the growth. And I think a lot of companies cannot keep up with the growth. And that's why I think there's so much uncertainty out there. And that's why workers are fighting for their rights. And I totally get it.
So those are the voices of some Manitobans who are talking about what it could mean, a possible Canada Post strike, and also what the service overall means in their lives in this province. Let's turn now to the people that work for Canada Post. On the podcast today, we're going to hear from 2 carriers, and they don't necessarily agree on the way forward for Canada Post. For one courier, news of a possible Canada Post strike is, at the very least, he says, disappointing. Mike Branconnier is his name. He's been a letter carrier with Canada Post for almost 20 years. And last winter, Mike did spend weeks on the picket line. But when that strike ended after the federal government stepped in, or I should say when that strike paused, he said he hoped he would never have to go on the picket line again. Here's what he shared about his point of view. Tell me a little bit about what you thought when you heard that, this is happening then.
It's heartbreaking. I mean, 20 years I've been doing a job that I absolutely love, and here we go again, and the mood yesterday morning after the long weekend when I walked into the depot was like a funeral. I can only speak for myself here. I want to make it very clear that I in no way represent Cup W or the company. I'm only speaking from my perspective, but I believe I'm safe to say that a lot of letter carriers share my views that this is just the most disappointing thing that could have happened.
Um, when you were out on the picket lines last year, right, late last year, what was different then and now, or were you feeling the same way about strike action last year?
I'm always disappointed with job action. In the last 20 years, I've been on more than a couple picket lines, and every time I generally feel the same way. I think I don't know that I'm an anomaly, but I will say that I love my job. I've never felt exploited, overworked. I've never felt underpaid. I know what I have, and I love what I know. And last winter, I know my sentiments were shared with a lot of other carriers out there on the line. We were, let down by a few different aspects of the union's conduct in all of this. There's a real shortcoming when it comes to communication with Cup W for the average letter carrier. I believe, especially myself, we don't, unless you're part of some social media group or thread of Cup W employees, which, as everybody knows, social media only gives you the most extreme views. The moderate opinions are somehow lost in the shuffle. You don't really know what's happening with negotiations, where we stand. There's not a lot of ways to have my voice heard with the union. We don't even have an app. When these strike votes happen, every single strike vote that's happened in my 20-year career has happened with little to no notice on, I don't know where these votes are happening, where to go, when to go. They're usually during the day when a lot of the letter carriers are working, so it's plant workers that can actually go and vote. There is no modern aspect to the way Cup W and the people who it's supposed to represent can have discourse on these things and have the discussion.
The union said that the decision to send the strike notice this time was based on a vote taken in November of last year. It's based on that vote. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that if they took another vote today with everyone, not just the people who can make it to some obscure location at some obscure time of day, but do a modern vote, bring it to us and get everyone's opinion, we wouldn't be on strike. I really believe that. I don't know who voted, and I don't know why they voted the way they did, but I really feel like it's unfair to base this newest job action on an opinion that was 6 months old, considering what we know now about the state of our company. It's hard to say you're fighting for a future for your employees when you're, in the next breath, just going to kill this company. I mean,
I'm just curious because the last strike lasted 32 days. So it's your individual life level. What was that like for you?
It was awful. My mental health was at the lowest it's ever been. I actually could only stand about 10 days of picketing because, look, I'm not anti-union. I believe there's a place for them, and I'm so appreciative of the gains that Cup W has made over its entire span. But I could not take being out there and seeing what the Canadian public opinion was of us online, holding Christmas hostage for rural Canadians, for reserves, for the people that really count on the post office. I had to actually not picket and go get a temp job, not for financial reasons, just for my mental health. I couldn't be out there anymore because, like I said, I love my job and I've never, ever felt exploited. I really think that we're asking for the wrong things. We're going about this all wrong.
What should be asked for? Because it was interesting in some of the analysis yesterday that this actually is not really about wages. It's really about modernizing Canada Post and what that means. And some workers might say, if they modernize in the wrong way, we could lose our jobs. You could lose your job. So what do you think moving forward? What do you want the union to fight for on your behalf?
I really think there's a way to negotiate this where you can keep the jobs and implement modern tactics and streamline this company through attrition. I don't want to sacrifice my paycheck for employees that don't even exist yet. So fighting for future employees, to me and to a lot of people that I've spoke to, is so silly. If you sign up for a job that you know you're going to be delivering on the weekends, that's what you sign up for. And there will be people that do that. I want a union that works with the company to streamline, to modernize, to try new things. In 20 years, when I started, it was 2006, that was the modernization of the post office. And every time the company that pays my mortgage said they were going to try something to make us more efficient, to make us more profitable, more competitive in the space, the union dug in its heels and wanted a time machine where it was justified in having an army of people walking through neighborhoods delivering mail that every single year I personally see less and less of. There aren't letters anymore. There aren't Christmas cards anymore. It's bills and flyers. And if we don't pivot, we're doomed. And I think that there's a spot for a union to work with the company in a non-adversarial way to save the jobs we have, to pivot. I would much rather change my duties and have a future with this company than just have it all come to a crash,
Mike,
to an end.
In our last minute here, I know that you said you're worried that we could really become, that the view of us is that we're a greedy, bloated, entitled group. Do you think that the last strike late last year changed public perception then? Is that what
Absolutely. Without a doubt. And maybe people don't understand how hard the job is, but they do understand that you don't need any training. Marcy, in 2 weeks, I could have you out there doing what I do. Yes, it's difficult to do it in the winter. Yes, we walk long days, but you don't need any special skills to do what we do. I don't know why they think we need to be paid like doctors and nurses. I think that we could change what we're asking for, work with this company to ensure a future of Canada Post, because post offices all over the world are collapsing, and we're just going to follow that.
I've got a statement I'm going to read here to close our story out. Mike, thank you for sharing your perspective.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for giving me a voice.
That's my conversation with Mike Branconnier, who's a postal worker here in Winnipeg with Canada Post. Well, as I mentioned, we have a different perspective from another letter carrier. Matthew Aitken, also, like Mike, has been delivering mail in Winnipeg for many years, 14 years to be exact. But he says while the last strike was difficult, he stands with the union. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about how you're feeling should you have to go out and that call happens at midnight tonight.
Well, I mean, I don't think that Mike is wrong, and I don't think a lot of postal workers are excited about going on strike. Removing your labor from the market is a last resort that workers go to when the two sides that are supposed to be negotiating a contract for them can't agree. Everybody's got financial anxiety. People are talking about just having stress while they're out walking their routes, while they're at work, and nobody wants to continue the strike.
What was your reaction when you saw that the strike notice came out? Because there were, one of the concerns we heard yesterday was that there wasn't a revote that happened, that, this is happening now. They didn't have another vote now for this strike action. They're looking at the results of November. Do you think there should have been another vote at this time or not?
Well, the government of Canada put the Canadian Union of Postal Workers in a really unique position. From what I understand, no union has ever been forced to pause a labor action. So this wasn't a second strike. This isn't a second strike. This is a paused strike. That's never happened in Canada before. I'm not sure what the status would be internationally. But there was no need to take a second strike vote because the job action is still on, essentially. So the government forced us into this position. And, if people are frustrated with not taking a second vote, I think, a lot of political parties in Canada would probably like to hear from them.
If you should have to hit the picket line, what will you be thinking about in terms of why you would support the strike action and what you'd be hoping for as a worker?
Well, I mean, I think when workers have to hit the picket line, it's very difficult. It's very confusing. It's and for those of us who are children of divorce, it's like reliving the trauma. Why can't mom and dad just get along? We've been placed in this situation by the government. Workers are really have their fates tied to these groups of people that don't work with us. Essentially, the negotiating committees of both sides. And they have a lot of time to come up with these negotiated agreements. And so when workers are forced to go on strike, that really is the last possible resort. How these organizations and the Canadian government have let this go on for so long is it's really questionable.
What are the issues you care about that you're hoping your union will put you in a better position for?
Well,
Like, is it pay? Is it working for future rights of workers?
So pay is always going to be an issue, right? The cost of things keeps going up, and I think all workers everywhere deserve a cost of a raise that matches the cost of living, or at least comes close, right? You know, if inflation goes up 10% and you only get a 5% raise, well, that's a 5% decrease in your overall spending power for the year. Last year, postal workers went on strike for 5 weeks. Well, you only work 52 weeks in a year. That's 10%. That was 10% of our annual income that was gone. And so when we get a raise of 5% on that year, but we had to strike for 5 weeks to get it, well, we really lost 5%. So wages are always an issue. And I think, I think both negotiating committees are coming close to an agreement on those wages. However, there was a report released last week on the state of Canada Post, and it was said that Canada Post is in an existential crisis.
It's been losing money since 2018, yep.
Losing money since 2018.
And it's not fighting back against the parcel services. There's actually a whole detailed article on CBC,
Yep. And there was a great article in the Canadian Press yesterday as well. But it doesn't tell you that Canada Post was making money steadily for 20 years before that. It doesn't tell you that Canada Post, when it has profits, they would go back to the Canadian government and back to the taxpayer.
Do you think it's still viable though under this certain model, or do you? Everyone's talking about modernizing it for the future. So maybe I should ask. Obviously, it needs to be in some way, But how much? Or are you thinking that maybe that's not necessary?
Yeah, I mean, I think even with the years that I've been with the corporation, I think, we've definitely seen some changes. And how viable is it to have somebody go up an icy set of steps to deliver a solicitation from a charity in the middle of winter? So I think there do have to be some changes to the delivery model, and that's a hard reality that both the corporation and the union have to face. But also, these are going to require acts of Parliament. In the Canada Post Act guarantees daily delivery of mail to every address in Canada, and so it's not like flipping a switch is going to change how mail gets delivered in this country.
It's a bigger picture.
There's a lot of items that need to be considered.
I want to ask you this: how do you think the last strike influenced public trust of Canada Post, and what's that like as a worker?
Well, as a worker, it's really terrible, actually, because when you're out there on the picket line and people are driving up, literally giving you the finger and telling you to get back to work, you wonder where civil solidarity has gone. Like, aren't you driving to work and going to do your job for your employer every day? Like, why would you take less from your employer? If it doesn't make sense. But there's also I don't think that the union did a really good enough job of getting to the media and putting out our side of the story leading up to this fight. Last year the corporation started coming out early in the year saying like it was experiencing some financial trouble, and the union never really seemed to get ahead of that story in the press. And so we were really chasing it. When we went on strike in 2018, there was a program that had been running for 3 years called Save Canada Post, and it was very popular. We had our national president went on national tours to promote this program. And when that strike came around in 2018, people knew about the post office. They knew about the struggles that we were facing, and they heavily supported us. That connection, having a public-facing a campaign for the union, just has not been there since 2018. And we're seeing the results of that in action by our union on the picket line.
We'll see what happens at midnight tonight, Matthew. Thank you so much for being here with your perspective. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's Matthew Aitken, a letter carrier with Canada Post. Well, as always on the podcast, if you want to weigh in from Manitoba on what Canada Post Service, our topic today, means to you in this province, or how you see the future for Canada Post in this country, you can write to us through our CBC radio email. It's radio893@cbc.ca. My name is Marcy Marcusa. The podcast is This is Manitoba. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.